Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for this introduction and warm welcome. I will just make sure, whoops, that was a bit too much. There we go. Je souhaiterais que le monde soit guéri. I would like the world to be healed. This very powerful message was written by a little boy called Garcia on the back of a postcard produced by the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Museum. And just a few weeks after that, Peter Maurer, the former president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, stepped onto the stage of a world conference addressing the most pressing issues of our time, the 33rd International Red Cross and Red Crescent Conference. And in his opening remarks, Peter Maurer quoted Garcia. This took place in 2019, in the heart of Geneva, the world capital of humanitarian affairs and multilateral diplomacy. Hundreds of diplomats, of humanitarian workers, of delegates, of ministers from all over the world were attending the 33rd conference in a building, which just so happens to be next to the swimming pool where my children learned how to swim. And my children, like so many others, also have opinions on the world's most pressing issues. They also ask questions, they also want to contribute, and they also imagine solutions. So why couldn't they have a conversation with the world leaders that are meeting just next door? And that's exactly when the museum comes into play. My colleagues and I selected a dozen posters from our collection of over 12,000 posters from the Red Cross, Red Crescent societies. We adapted them and printed them into postcards, hundreds of postcards, which we distributed to school children in Geneva, teaming up with the conference organizers and the public school system. We engineered an entire educational kit to empower these children aged 8 to 12 to speak out. And we received hundreds and hundreds of beautifully handwritten messages, and we slipped every single one of them in the welcome bags of the 2,000 participants to that world conference. And that is, to me, exactly what a museum is all about. A museum is a powerful catalyst that creates new and impactful connections through art and heritage. So, at that point, I had been in my job for 6 months. Things were going pretty well, and then suddenly, everything stopped. Lockdown, the entire cultural world came to a halt everywhere. In my country, Switzerland, the pandemic was, of course, a huge crisis, but in so many other countries around the world, it was just another crisis on top of war, on top of natural disasters, and so on. So, of course, my colleagues and I were a little shocked, but we decided to fight back. We decided to serve the community as a museum, and we decided to stand by our visitors. So this means that within the first 48 hours of the closure, we were organizing a big international project with over 50 Magnum photographers all around the world who were sending us live images of the pandemic, which we would discuss every week with our online community to try to understand what was going on, change as it was unfolding. Eventually, this project turned into a major exhibition. It became a film as well, and it became a crowdsourced archive of the pandemic, which we keep at the museum. So, as you can see, I'm really passionate about museums, about how they can reinvent themselves, about the positive change they can bring to society in times of crisis or not. So, how does this work on a daily basis in the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Museum? How do we express this through our activities? Well, the first thing we do with my colleagues is really to place a question at the heart of our strategy. Everything we do is driven by a question, not an assertion, but a question. What does humanitarian action have to do with me in my life here and now? And we ponder this question with our visitors. We listen to them, we learn with them, through multidisciplinary projects that basically connect 3 parallel groups. People from all ages and backgrounds, living their daily lives in Geneva and beyond, humanitarian workers, and professionals from the fields of art, culture, and research. These three groups often talk about the same topics, but they rarely do so together. So let me give you an example. Gender and diversity. That's one of these topics. We dedicated an entire year to this subject at the museum. We produced exhibitions based on heritage and contemporary art to better understand the complexity of this subject. Who cares? Gender and humanitarian action. We conducted an international research to understand what a feminist and inclusive museum could be, and we shared our key findings in a digital toolkit. And finally, we walked the talk, becoming the first museum in Switzerland to be a certified LGBTI-friendly employer. So every day, my colleagues and I do our very best to go beyond preconceived ideas, to provide context and perspective, and especially to ask questions. So it sounds great, and it is all great, but actually it only really works if I myself start by recognizing that my understanding and my experience of the world is necessarily informed by the fact that I am a white, cisgender man with a good job living in a wealthy and peaceful city. That museums have been seen for so long as places of privilege and that they have behaved so as well. That museums have been agents of the colonial system, and that museums, well, their collections rarely represent the great diversity of society. I can't change any of that, but I for sure can acknowledge it. And I can do my very best to share power. And you can share power by understanding the museum as an opening, as a welcoming and challenging platform, one where everyone can feel recognized, safe, and legitimate to interact and to learn. So let me give you a few more examples of what this means in our museum on a daily basis. It means, for example, trusting over 200 first-year architecture students to totally redesign our outdoor spaces to answer needs expressed by our visitors, which we took care of collecting. It means redesigning our ground floor to make it much more comfortable, but doing so on the basis of circular economy. It means co-constructing these projects with our visitors and making sure they get as many opportunities as possible to influence us. It means creating the first young advisory board in a museum in Switzerland. It means showing every day that process is more important than product and that collective intelligence is so much greater than any given genius. It fundamentally means being of service to the institution and playing a proactive role in a greater social and economic ecosystem. And it fundamentally means being all of this. Let me just see if I can get to that. There we go. No. So I'll just try to read it to you. Empowering, useful, inclusive, hybrid, co-constructed, porous, consistent, diverse, kind, and hopeful. And of course, it's tough. It's tough to address one's own biases in public. It's tough to break down silos between different fields of expertise and explore new territories. It's tough to challenge what people expect a museum to be. It's tough to so often have to justify why our institutions matter. And it's tough to bring people to listen to one another, to bring people to feel concerned about world issues without being helpless, but encouraged and optimistic. But it's definitely worth it. It's worth it because we professionals in the field of culture are powerful storytellers, and our stories can have a positive impact on society. We have the power to create new narratives. We have the power to give voice to those who have none. We have the power to instigate conversation, to imagine the future, to nurture critical thinking, to create agency, and to care. And it's definitely worth it because Garcia, this little boy, got to speak out, and thanks to a museum, the great leaders of this world listened to him. I would like the world to be healed. Well, through our museums, our theaters, our opera houses, our festivals, our cinemas, we truly have the power to heal the world. So let's get to it. Thank you.